So here's some guidance on good practice for giving evidence of testing for these programming standards. So here's a statement that you need to be aware of in the assessment schedule. Students would typically have tested each module, so that's each function, incrementally, and created a testing plan with expected boundary and invalid cases, just like you had at level 1, and then documented development of the program using a testing log. Let's look at an example of what that might look like. So here's a program that I have written. It calculates the day of the week for any given date that you put in, and it's a reasonably complex program, and I've broken it up into functions, as we should do. I have one function here called month offset, which is a good example of a function that needs testing. It takes the number of the month as the input and returns a number from this list as the output. So up here I've started to do some testing. I've put a console.log statement currently commented out as a block of code. Let's uncomment it. And it says that if I put the value 2 in there, I expect the value 4 to come out. So I can just very quickly test that. So program running, hit F12, I expected 4, I got a 4. That's great. Another good thing about this is I can now say, right, I've got my one test. So incremental testing, I can say, now I've tested one thing, I can test some other things. So let's put some different values that I might put into my actually I'll go this way around, into my function, and I'll explain why I'm putting these in a moment. So if I put in 2, I expect 4. If I put in 6, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I expect a 5 to come out. And that's another valid value. Month offset 1, that's on the bottom end of the array, and is one of those typical things where you could have an out by 1 error. So I'm going to say the expected value here I happen to know is 1, but this is a valid boundary value because it's on the edge of the list that's going in. And the same, I'm actually going to put 0 here. This is an expected error of some kind. I'm not expecting to see a correct value to appear from this, and this is an invalid boundary because I know that my function subtracts 1, and it's going to be trying to look at the -1th element of that array. So that's an invalid boundary, and if I put in 12, that would be another valid boundary. Or I could just put in something like expected. This one again will be an error, and that's invalid. So it's been very quick for me to just add a bunch of just spotted that, a bunch of tests which are valid, invalid and boundary, which meets exactly the criteria that I need to, and I can run those tests, have a quick look and check in my little list that I've got what I expected to have, 451 error. Perfect. And I don't need to run these all the time. Very quick to just comment that block of code out again, and I can keep that, and if I want to test again later I can just uncomment it. And also of course I can add a bunch more console.logs for other functions. So as I decide to test my, for example, isLeap function, which is clearly wrong at the moment because there's a to-do in it, I can add some testing in here and add some more comments about what I'm doing there. So what I'm building here is an overall record of my testing program actually within the program, and let's have a look at what that would look like in the testing log. So in the testing log I can say I've tested this function month offset. I can just quickly grab all of these console.log statements and paste them in there, so I've got a nice easy little record there of what I've been doing. I've put the date and I've put some notes, a bit made up. I said, oh yeah, initially I found an out by 1 error and then I fixed it. So it's just a sort of ongoing incremental update and testing thing. Now there are other ways to do testing. Of course, sometimes you need to do user input. I'll talk more about that in a second. And yeah, this is not the only way to record testing, but if I do see this in your submission, I'm coming to mark this, I'll be delighted, because this shows me you have met the criteria exactly. You've done a really neat job of recording that you've done incremental testing. One last point about this is this month offset function is really easy to test because it takes a single parameter and returns a single value. So that lends itself beautifully to just checking that if I put this in, I get this. It wouldn't be possible to do this if, for instance, I had any kind of prompts, any inputs from the user within this function. So we should try to avoid that, try to change your code so that you have inputs separate from functions that actually do stuff. Also, this function hasn't needed to touch any global variables. I haven't started fiddling around with any of these other global variables that are available. It just takes a parameter and returns a value. And again, that makes it easy to test. If it was fiddling around with global values, it wouldn't be possible to do this. So that's another good reason for not using globals where possible. Yep, I think that's about it testing wise.